You won't believe me when I say this, but the moment I stepped out of my own body, I knew America's future wasn't hidden in politics or power. It was written in light. That's how Elena Martinez began her email to us. A quiet woman from Texas, she had lived an ordinary life until one afternoon changed everything. What she experienced was not just a near-death moment. It was a revelation. Elena insists Jesus himself showed her what's coming next to America. And tonight you'll hear her words exactly as she wrote them, raw and unfiltered. I never imagined the day my heart would stop, would feel like this. You think of death as a collapse, a darkness, an end, but the very instant my chest tightened and breath left me, I realized it was not ending but unfolding. My last sensation inside the body was heaviness, like wearing a coat of iron too long. And then, without struggle, it slipped away. You continue breathing, but without lungs. You continue seeing, but not with eyes. Every sense expands, and the first thing you notice is freedom, pure, weightless, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. I remember hearing the silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of creation holding its breath. The sound of cars, the hum of electricity, the beating of time, all gone. In its place, an awareness humming underneath everything. It felt like standing at the edge of a vast ocean, except the waves were not water but light itself, folding and unfolding around me. The light was not harsh, it was soft, like dawn slipping under the door, warming your skin before you even rise. I felt it brush across me, the way a mother might place a hand on her child's forehead. Gentle. Steady. Sure. I looked down, and my body was still there. Pale, motionless, heavy. It should have frightened me, but it didn't. Instead, I felt relief, as if I had been dragging that form through years of sorrow and suddenly set it down. You have carried grief, fear, the endless rush of bills and deadlines. Imagine letting them all fall from your shoulders in one breath. That's what it was like. The greatest weight was not flesh, but worry. And I realized we cling so hard to what binds us that we forget freedom is waiting just beyond one heartbeat. The first step out of the body was like being invited to a secret. I did not stumble. I did not float. I simply shifted. One moment I was in the car seat, the next I was beside it, and then above it. The world shimmered, edges softening like a watercolor painting in rain. Trees pulsed as if alive. Asphalt glistened like wet stone, though no rain had fallen. I remember reaching for the steering wheel with hands that were no longer hands, only to realize I could pass through it. And instead of fear, I felt curiosity, like a child discovering snow for the first time. Then came the pull. It wasn't violent. It wasn't a force dragging me against my will. It was more like the way a melody pulls your memory into tears, or the way the scent of bread draws you back to your grandmother's kitchen. It was love disguised as gravity. I leaned into it without knowing why, because everything in me whispered, "This is home." The tunnel appeared not as darkness but as shimmer. Imagine the heat rising off a Texas highway in July, bending air, warping vision. Only here, it wasn't heat, it was living light. Gold and silver threads twisted together, forming a path that wasn't solid but undeniable. As I leaned forward, it enfolded me, wrapping my being in a current so strong, yet so soft it carried me without effort. I didn't have to walk. I didn't have to climb. It lifted me like an escalator you never noticed existed beneath your feet. And the farther I went, the lighter I became. Emotions came alive in colors. Peace wasn't just a feeling, it was blue washing over me, humming like a low cello. Joy wasn't just a thought, it was gold vibrating in the air, filling me with laughter. Even awe had a texture, like velvet stretched against my skin, reminding me that I was both small and infinite. You continue to feel, but without limit. You continue to see, but beyond edges. I whispered, "Where am I?" Though no lips moved, and the answer arrived not as sound but as knowing. "You are crossing over." That phrase echoed through me. Crossing over, not ending, not vanishing, not ceasing. I realized the word, goodbye, had always been a lie. We never end, we arrive. I looked back once more at my car on the roadside, the body slumped peacefully inside. Instead of panic, I felt tenderness. That vessel had carried me through years of laughter, pain, hope. But it was never me. It was a shell, and shells are meant to be left when the pearl is ready. The air in the tunnel shimmered with memory. Scenes from my life unfolded around me, not like movies, but like paintings alive with breath. My first day of school, my hands clutching a red lunchbox. The night I wept alone after losing someone I loved. The morning I sang in the kitchen, unaware angels listened. None of these moments accused me. None condemned me. They simply showed me how each thread, painful or sweet, was part of a tapestry I had never seen whole. For the first time, I understood. Nothing was wasted. The light thickened, becoming music. I could hear notes without instruments, harmonies woven into the fabric of existence. Each sound carried truth. The hum of mercy, the rhythm of grace, the melody of love. I laughed in the silence, realizing heaven's music was not performed, it was lived. Every act of kindness, every prayer whispered, every tear shed had joined this chorus all along. And now, it sang back to me. As the tunnel widened, I felt a presence. Not seen, not defined, but undeniable. It was as if someone stood just behind me, hand almost on my shoulder, close enough to steady me without touch. Comfort radiated, washing away the last residue of fear. I asked in thought, "Who are you?" And the answer was gentle but firm. "You will see." That phrase was enough. For once, I didn't need control. I didn't need a plan. Trust became the sweetest release of all. Every veil lifted, and I knew, this was not escape, this was homecoming, like shrugging off a heavy backpack after a long, hot day. Multiply that by eternity, and you begin to understand the relief. Regret, gone. Fear, gone. Debt, gone. Only love remained, vast and unshakable. And in that love, I realized I was not heading into nothingness. I was being welcomed. And so, the first step of my journey was not death, but life. A life brighter, sharper, deeper than anything earth could hold. A life where light had weight and silence had song. A life where even you, listening now, are closer to than you think. Because death is not far. It is a door thinner than breath. And the one waiting on the other side is not waiting to end you, but to awaken you. The light did not release me. It drew me deeper, like a current in a river that knows its own destination. You continue forward not because you decide to, but because love itself carries you. The tunnel thinned, layers of brightness unfolding like veils torn away one by one. Each veil shimmered, and as it vanished, I felt another piece of weight leave me, fear first, then shame, then doubt. By the time the last veil dissolved, I was stripped down to something I had never truly known before. My soul, naked and unafraid. Colors lived in this place, not painted, not reflected, alive. Blue wrapped around me like a hymn, pulsing with calm. Green whispered through me like the breath of forests at dawn. Gold sparkled with laughter, playful and free. These weren't metaphors. I heard blue. I tasted gold. I felt green brush my skin like silk. Every sense overlapped, interwoven, as though heaven had no boundaries. No need to separate sound from sight or touch from taste. Everything was whole, and I belonged in that wholeness. It was here, in this ocean of living light, that I realized I was not alone. At first it was only a nearness, a warmth at my side, like when you walk into a room and know someone is watching over you. Then it grew stronger, clearer. A figure walked beside me. Not floating, not ghostly, but walking each step measured, steady, grounded in a way that made me realize he had been walking with me long before I noticed. I turned toward him. His form was radiant, yet solid. His face shimmered between countless expressions, youthful one moment, ancient the next, then neither. I tried to form the question in my thoughts. "Are you an angel?" But before I finished, he smiled. Not the distant smile of a stranger, but the familiar one of someone who has always known me. His answer was not sound but thought pressed into my being. "I am your guide. I have walked with you more times than you have noticed." The truth of his words hit me like a wave. I remembered the near-miss car crash, the nudge to call someone just before tragedy struck, the whisper to comfort a stranger when I had no reason. All those moments I thought were coincidence, they were him. He had been there all along, silent but steadfast. My heart broke open, and awe filled me like fire and water at once. We walked together through the widening brightness. He did not rush me. He let me look, let me breathe, let me marvel. Each step deepened my awareness that I was safe, utterly safe, in a way I had never known on Earth. On Earth, Safety is fragile, locks on doors, alarms on walls, money in banks. But here, safety was a presence, woven into the very air. I whispered within myself, "Am I dying?" My guide turned his head gently, eyes shining. His reply, "You are waking." That sentence struck like lightning. Dying was waking. Leaving Earth was opening eyes to what had always been true. All my life, I feared endings. Yet here I understood. There was no end, only arrival. It was as though every goodbye I had ever spoken was a misunderstanding. None of us vanish, we simply cross. The path shifted. The tunnel that carried me widened into a horizon, vast and shimmering. Fields stretched before me, each blade of grass glowing as though lit from within. A river flowed nearby, not of water but of light, liquid gold and silver, rippling with colors unnamed. I dipped my hand or what passed as a hand into its stream, and memories washed over me. Times I had chosen love, times I had forgiven, times I had offered kindness no one noticed. Each moment shimmered back into me, not as pride but as warmth, as if heaven itself remembered and rejoiced over what I had forgotten. I looked at my guide, astonished. "Why does this feel more real than Earth?" His answer was simple, threaded with a depth that pierced me. "Because here nothing hides." The words rolled over me like thunder. Earth is a place of shadows, of masks, of hidden fears, of unspoken pain. But here, there was no mask, no need to hide, no lies to protect us from one another. Here, I was seen completely and loved anyway. Every step filled me with belonging. I laughed aloud not with sound but with the vibration of joy because I realized the ground beneath me knew me. The grass cradled my feet as though it remembered every step I had ever taken. The air itself seemed to recognize me, wrapping me in its embrace. My guide nodded, affirming the thought before I spoke it. "This place has always known you." The garden ahead pulsed with life. Every flower glowed, not as decoration but as testimony. Each one whispered truths older than time. "You are safe, you are loved, you are home." The silence around us wasn't empty, it was alive, humming with music too pure for human ears. You continue listening, and the longer you listen, the more you realize, this silence is God breathing. I turned to my guide, overwhelmed. He raised his hand, and the horizon shifted again. Light gathered in the distance, not like sunrise, but like a person. It grew brighter, closer, until I felt it entering me. My guide whispered through thought, "You will meet him soon. But first, I must prepare your eyes." His words trembled inside me, because I knew exactly who was coming. At that moment, I realized something I had never considered. Heaven is not just a place. Heaven is a person. And I was walking straight toward him. I stepped through the curtain of light and entered a garden that did not belong to any map I had ever known. The air there was soft as a hymn, and it carried a warmth that felt like a hand resting on the back of your neck. Gentle, steady, reassuring. You continue to breathe in that warmth even though your lungs no longer work the way they used to. Everything around me leaned toward life. Blades of grass that seemed to breathe in time with me. Flowers opening like memories coming back into focus. A river that flowed not with water but with liquid light, each ripple a sigh. The first thing I noticed was how real everything felt. On Earth, reality is often hard-edged, sharp corners, loud alarms, the rattle of urgency. Here, edges blurred in the best way, as if whole world had been retuned to mercy. The ground cradled my feet as though it remembered each footprint I would ever leave. When I walked, the grass folded and rose as if to welcome me, each blade a small benediction. I could feel colors touch me. Blue wrapped me like a soft shawl. Gold coated the air with warmth. Green tucked itself under my shoulder like a blanket. There were no harsh lights, only a luminous, tender glow that seemed to hum. A main emotion settled over me and stayed. Wonder. Not the quick spark of curiosity you get reading a headline, but a deep, sustaining wonder that held me like a lullaby. It made me soften. It made my chest unclench. Even the memories that had clung to me in life, the resentments, the shame, the unanswered questions, seemed to melt into the soil and become compost for something kinder. Love felt practical here. It wasn't abstract. It was a force that repaired small things quietly. A torn ribbon mended itself. A scar on my remembered hand smoothed as if time was ironing out pain. My guide walked beside me, but the garden spoke through everything. Wind, if you could call it wind, murmured like a prayer, rustling leaves that hummed with stories. The river's surface reflected scenes from my life, not to punish, but to clarify. Choices and their echoes, small mercies I had forgotten to count. I crouched by the river and let images wash over my skin without fear, because here, confession was unnecessary. Truth arrived like a warm bath, cleansing but never shaming. You continue watching and realize that the past was not a list of failures, but a mosaic of learning and grace. There was a tidbit I could not ignore. Time here did not behave like a clock. On Earth, everything is measured minutes, appointments, deadlines. In the garden, those measures dissolved. Moments stretched or folded like paper an hour could feel like an eternity of presence, and a lifetime could compress into a single, crystalline instant. I remember noting this when I lifted a leaf and watched its veins pulsing. My watch had long since stopped in the car, but I had no need for it anymore. Time became texture, not tyrant. People sometimes ask whether the senses dull after you leave flesh. The answer is surprising. Senses expand. I could hear colors. I could taste the memory of my mother's laughter like honey. Sound and sight braided together into something new. A bird's song tasted like cinnamon and blue, and the scent of the river was a chorus of names. These were soft gifts that arrived not as spectacle, but as invitation inviting me to remember what I had always been before the world taught me how to hide. I found a place to sit, though sitting looked different here. The grass lifted slightly, forming a cradle that fit my shape as perfectly as a prayer. A breeze, so mild it could have been a thought, brushed my cheek, and the memory of my father came. The way he hummed while fixing a fence, the roughness of his palms. Instead of pain, that memory unspooled into gratitude. I let myself be grateful fully, without the resistance I habitually carried, without the small voice saying, "You shouldn't feel this because you did that." Gratitude here was like bread breaking and passing between hands. Children's laughter echoed in the distance, not sharp but like wind chimes. And I found myself smiling because I understood something new. Heaven's joy is not loud showmanship. It is a steady current that bubbles up when people live truth. I watched a group gather under a tree. No platform, no program, just people sitting together, hands touching, faces unguarded. They weren't performing faith, they were practicing it, and the practice looked like kindness made visible. I felt a pull in my chest, a tenderness so tender it made me want to weep softly into the light. My guide pointed without pointing toward a path that led deeper into the garden. He said nothing with words. Instead, a knowing unfurled inside me that something awaited further in. You continue forward because the heart leans that way, and in this place your heart is honest. As we walked, the garden introduced me to other presences, some that shimmered like warm glass, others that had the gentle solidity of old friends. None were strange in the way strangers are, they were familiar as scent. At one point, I paused and tried to name what I felt. Language on earth often fails at the edges of grace, but I tried anyway. It was peace, yes, but not passive. It was peace that organized everything toward beauty. It was peace that made truth gentle. Each soft form around me, the hush of leaves, the cradle of grass, the murmur of the river, seemed to conspire to teach me how to carry this peace back. There was a small, tender lesson woven into the garden's fabric I will not forget. In one corner, a single flower glowed a color I had no name for. When I reached out, it shivered and released a petal that floated like a whisper into my palm. The petal warmed, and a memory bloomed in me, a moment I had once judged harshly. In that bloom, I saw the decision I had made, and rather than blame, I felt the possibility of repair. The petal dissolved into light on my tongue, and I tasted mercy. That taste changed me. It didn't erase what had been, but it rearranged it. Where I had once clung to guilt, I now held the shape of responsibility softened by grace. You continue to learn that remorse without purpose is heavy, but remorse shaped by action becomes a tool. I felt my will knit to something larger than my shame. I felt hope align under my ribs like a small engine. As the garden breathed and the river sang, I realized one more thing. Homecoming is not an arrival alone. It is a recommission. The safety and the tenderness were not merely for my comfort. They were preparation. I felt hands not visible, but present, gently readying me for what would come next. And in that moment, beneath a sky that smelled faintly of childhood evenings and warm bread, I knew I would not simply stay. I would be sent. I felt it before I saw him. The garden grew brighter, not with sunlight but with a presence, a radiance that seemed to know my name even before sound formed. The air itself shifted, humming, and the river of light at my side shimmered as though it recognized who was coming. You continue breathing, but each breath feels like it belongs to someone greater, like you are inhaling love itself. My guide stepped slightly aside, his face tender, and without a word I understood this was the moment I had been moving toward since the first heartbeat in my mother's womb. The brightness gathered into a figure. At first it seemed like dawn breaking, light spilling over a horizon. But then the light had eyes. Eyes that were not just looking at me but through me, into every secret, every shadow, every scar I had carried. I wanted to fall apart, and yet I had never felt more whole. Before I could move, my knees bent of their own accord. It wasn't choice, it was recognition. I whispered, though no sound was needed. "My lord." He spoke my name. Just my name. And that one word undid me. It was not sound but vibration, carried through every cell of my being. His voice was like every lullaby I had ever needed, every hymn I had ever half forgotten, every whisper of comfort I had ignored in the dark. It shook me, not to frighten me, but to remind me that I had always belonged. I wept without tears, because here weeping was not about sorrow, it was about release. The main emotion was overwhelming love. Not sentimental, not vague. It was thick, tangible, weighty as gravity, but soft as a blanket tucked under your chin. He knew everything, every mistake, every cruelty, every selfish thought, and instead of condemnation, I saw his love weaving even those broken threads into a larger design. His gaze carried no denial of my sins, but his love did not stop because of them. It pressed harder, stronger, until even my shame dissolved. It was not indulgence, it was transformation. A tidbit of information came to me in this moment, clearer than any sermon I had ever heard. His love does not excuse, it recreates. I understood suddenly why repentance matters. It is not about punishment, it is about allowing his love to reshape what we have bent. Free will is real, but so is the invitation to let him bend us back into truth. I tried to speak, fumbling like a child. "Am I dreaming?" He smiled, and the smile itself steadied me. His reply came with both gentleness and authority. "You are remembering." The words filled me with awe, because I understood heaven was not foreign to me. I had always known it deep down. Earth had dulled the memory, but his voice restored it. It was like remembering the sound of your mother's laugh after years of silence. Recognition so deep it aches. He lifted me not with hands, but with a look. I felt myself rise, strength entering where weakness had once ruled. My shame no longer defined me. His gaze did. And in that gaze, I was more myself than I had ever been. I was not erased. I was fulfilled. I dared to ask, though my thoughts trembled. "Why me?" His eyes grew serious, fierce and tender at once. "Because you will not twist my words, you will speak them plain." Fear pricked at me. Fear of ridicule, of being dismissed, of being mocked as delusional. I whispered, "What if no one believes me?" His answer was sharp but kind. "Do not fear their disbelief. Fear silence, for silence keeps many in darkness." Those words pierced me. Fear, silence. I realized then that the greatest danger is not rejection, but withholding the truth that has been entrusted. We spend so much of our lives fearing judgment from others, but heaven sees the greater tragedy in a voice left unused. He reached out, his hand. When I touched it, I felt the weight of history itself. Every battle, every prayer, every tear shed by my nation coursed through him. It was too heavy, and I gasped. "It's too much," he answered. "That is why I carry it." His hand steadied me, and suddenly I knew this meeting was not just about my comfort. It was about mission. He leaned closer, his eyes burning into mine. "What I will show you is not to create panic. It is to anchor faith. America is entering a shaking, but in that shaking, many hearts will awaken." His words did not thunder. They pulsed, steady and calm, like a drumbeat that would echo through my soul forever. The shaking was not destruction. It was surgery, painful, yes, but meant to heal. I felt courage rising inside me, not from myself, but from his presence flowing through me. His gaze assured me, this was not about my strength, it was about his. He did not need me perfect. He needed me willing. And in that moment, I said yes, not out loud, but in every fiber of my being. Yes to carrying his message. Yes to speaking what I had seen. Yes to trusting that his love was enough to cover my weakness. The garden shimmered brighter, as though creation itself celebrated my surrender. Flowers leaned toward him. The river rippled in applause. Even the silence grew heavier, thick with meaning. I knew then I was not dreaming, not hallucinating. I was face to face with the Lord of all, and he had chosen to entrust me with a warning and a hope for a nation. You continue listening now, and I need you to hear this as plainly as I did then. Jesus is real. His love is stronger than fear. And he has not abandoned us. Not me, not you, not even America. When he turned his gaze toward the wide land, the vision shifted as if a slow camera panned across a painted map brought suddenly to life. You feel it like a pressure in your chest, not from fear alone, but from the weight of seeing a whole people on the brink. The first thing I saw were lights, millions of tiny lamps, still burning in houses and cities, and then a tremor, subtle at first, like a hand running a fingertip over a table. Not all lights went out, but some dipped and flickered, as if someone had run a shadow between them and the source. The scene smelled faintly of ozone and old paper, like a church left open during a storm. That smell lodged in me, and even now, when thunder rolls, your memory might catch a thread of that same scent. The main emotion that washed over me then was urgent hope. It is a strange twin. Urgency that pries you awake, and hope that steadies your fingers on the plow. Jesus did not show me ruin for ruin's sake. He showed testing. Foundations were being touched. The things people trusted, systems, comforts, the invisible scaffolding of daily life, began to tremble under strain. Streets hummed with alarm. Screens flashed warnings. But alongside the panic, I noticed small lamps in windows. Candlelight reflected in quiet faces. Breath held in prayer. Those small things did not fix the quake, yet they steadied souls. The tidbit that cut into me like a clean knife was this. The shaking tests foundations more than structures. It is less about brick and more about belief. As the vision unfolded, I saw crowds move like flocks, directionless at first. Some fled towards safety parking lots, highways, church doors, some stood frozen, staring at the sky as if expecting the sky to explain itself. The weather obeyed a new logic. Storms rose that did not obey seasons, and winds blew with voices in them that sounded like memories. You continue watching, and feel the cold of metal and the heat of panic mixed in the same breath. Yet within alleys and living rooms, something else stirred. People who had practiced small, steady acts of faith were not unscathed, but they were lit from within. Their faces held a glow that the panic could not dim. It was as if prayer was a slow fuse, and when the shaking began, the fuse caught and gave off light. I could almost hear the noise's texture, the clatter of shutters, the soft rustle of rosary beads, the murmur of people whispering names in the dark. 3 soft forms braided through that noise, the whisper of a neighbor's voice, offering a blanket, the hush of someone kneeling beside a child, the faint scrape of hands sharing bread. These soft acts, small and almost invisible, multiplied like sparks. Each sparked a light that pushed back a fraction of the dark. When people forgave, a shadow thinned. When someone reached out, a door opened that had been stuck for years. Scenes of division came next, families arguing over resources, strangers lashing out over fear, voices sharpened into accusation, screens that once connected people turned into amplifiers of anger. It was painful to watch, and my heart twisted. Yet the vision did not dwell in accusation. It lingered on choice. In the eye of the tremor, I saw a woman ordinary kneel beside a couch and hold an old man's hand, the kind of soft touch nobody would tape for ratings. Her choice made a cluster of light that pushed away the nearest dark. That single small mercy felt enormous. You notice how mercy works. It does not scream, it settles. Then I saw leaders fall away, not meaning political names alone, but the idols we lean on: celebrity, wealth, security. When those figures faltered, people around them reached for something steadier. It was not the building that mattered, but the people inside. And the people inside found one another. Street corners that had been battlegrounds for gossip became kitchens where strangers were fed. The economy of scarcity loosened, replaced by an economy of giving. Bread appeared where it was needed because hands reached where ledgers could not. Those quiet exchanges formed a map of recovery that no policy could have drawn alone. The shaking also revealed a curious thing: clarity. When noise falls away, truth often speaks clearer. I saw secrets surface like flotsam, and with them came accountability and healing. Churches filled in ways I had not expected, not because of spectacle, but because people sought shelter in a different way. Choirs formed in basements. Hymns rose in grocery stores. I saw teenagers leading small groups under open skies with a seriousness that startled me. The new leaders did not arrive on platforms. They arrived at kitchen tables and in the quiet corners of community rooms. Their authority was not printed in a program. It was felt in the steadiness of their presence. There was a smell that threaded these scenes. Wet earth after rain, the smell of someone's coat left by the door, the faint perfume of lilies. It was domestic and holy at once, a scent that said people were choosing to be neighbors again. Small rituals returned, people lighting candles at windowsills, leaving bowls of food on stoops, mothers humming the same lullabies their grandmothers sang. It was not a sudden turning toward piety, but a turning toward each other, and that pivot birthed resilience. Throughout the vision, Jesus spoke little. His presence was a tide rather than words. He showed me the shaking, and then, the response. People forming chains that wove communities back together. In a stadium filled with stunned faces, a single elder rose and began to pray, and prayer moved through the crowd like a current. It did not fix every wound immediately, but it anchored many. The shaking had purpose. It peeled away facades, until what remained could be mended. Finally, he showed me the horizon after the tremor, a dawn threaded with both scar and green shoot. Buildings still bore marks, but in the spaces between them, gardens bloomed where no one had planted seeds before. It was the echo of the garden I had stood in earlier. New life emerging where rubble lay, hands working together to stack stones, children learning songs they would carry forward. The shaking had been brutal, messy, but through it, a people began to wake to what actually sustains them. You continue listening now, and I need you to take this in, not as doom, but as instruction. The shaking will reveal what your heart is built on. If you have invested only in comforts that vanish, your footing will feel unstable. But if you have invested in love, in small mercies, in the steady practice of prayer and kindness, you will be a light bearer in the dark. That is what I saw, not the end of a nation, but the testing that births a renewed people. The vision deepened, and what I saw next carried both dread and tenderness. You continue standing beside me in this memory, and you can almost feel the air shift like a storm pressing its hand against the windows of a house. The shaking I had already witnessed now grew into scenes of chaos. Not chaos for spectacle, but chaos that revealed what had been hidden. The sky itself seemed restless, bending and twisting, clouds tearing into shapes that looked like wounds. Winds carried voices, arguments echoing louder than thunder, as if every division of heart was suddenly shouted into the open. I saw families torn by anger, screens glowing in dark rooms where people hurled words sharper than knives. Cities flickered in and out of light. Storms rolled across coastlines, not just of weather, but of spirit. Hurricanes lashed out in one region, while in another, fires crawled across hills like living beasts. You could smell the smoke in your nostrils, but beneath it there was something stranger, the scent of fear itself, bitter and metallic, a taste that clung to the tongue. Fear spread faster than wind. And yet, in the midst of that terror, there were small flames of a different kind. I noticed them first in kitchens, mothers gathering children, whispering prayers with voices unshaken by the storm outside. I saw men kneel in garages, hands greasy from work, setting tools aside to clasp palms together. I saw elderly women lighting candles on windowsills, their glow trembling but steady. Each act of prayer became like a lantern, glowing softly against the black tide. When one person prayed, a spark rose. When families prayed together, the sparks multiplied until whole streets shimmered like constellations. The darkness raged, but the light answered back. The main emotion of this part was awe in the face of contrast. How could such terror coexist with such beauty? And yet it did. People running in panic seemed almost translucent, their faces pale with despair. Meanwhile, those kneeling to pray glowed solid, vibrant, as if their souls had weight while others faded. The tidbit that struck me was clear. Fear makes people less real, but faith makes them more alive. It was not a metaphor. I saw it with my own eyes, bodies dissolving into shadow when consumed by terror, and others growing luminous when consumed by trust. Storms of division shook the land. People marched in rage, shouting across barricades, eyes blinded by anger. Families fractured, siblings refusing to speak. Neighbors turned on each other over scraps of news. The noise was deafening, screens flashing like lightning bolts of accusation. Yet in quiet corners, a counter-melody rose. You continue listening, and you can hear it, two soft hymns sung under breath. The low hum of rosaries sliding through fingers. The murmured, Our Father spoken not in churches, but in living rooms. Those soft forms wove a stronger net than the loudest storm. 3 sounds linger with me even now. The shuffle of children's feet as they circled in prayer. The crackle of firewood where families gathered to share bread. The trembling breath of someone whispering forgiveness even when hurt. These were not heroic acts by the world's standards. They were seeds. And when planted in the soil of suffering, they grew roots deeper than fear could reach. Jesus stood beside me as the vision unfolded. His presence anchored me, though his face bore sorrow. He did not show delight in the shaking. He showed grief that it was necessary. I asked in thought, Why does it look like chaos? His reply came not as thunder but as a calm river through my soul. It looks like awakening. His words startled me. Awakening? Yet, as I watched again, I understood. The storm was not random punishment. It was exposure. It stripped away illusions and left only what could endure. And what endured was love. In the vision, I saw homes without electricity glowing brighter than cathedrals because of prayer. I saw small churches, ignored for years, suddenly filled beyond capacity. I saw strangers who had once passed each other without a nod, now holding hands, singing in the open. The chaos did not erase them, it revealed them. It revealed that when everything shakes, the soul must choose. Fade into fear or burn with faith. At one point, I saw a mother stand at her doorway during a blackout, holding a single candle. Neighbors gathered, one by one, drawn not by her wealth or strength, but by the steadiness of that flame. They entered her home, shared her food, prayed together, and in that unity, their fear dissolved. A small house became a lighthouse, guiding others through the storm. That image has never left me. It taught me that revival does not begin in stadiums. It begins in living rooms where candles are lit in faith. And still the storms raged. Lightning tore across skies, splitting towers, flooding streets. But in every surge of darkness, the lights of prayer multiplied. Jesus whispered again, The darkness will roar, but it cannot win. My light will always rise higher. His voice steadied me, and I felt it steady the people in the vision too. Their trembling turned to singing, their despair to endurance. What began as chaos transformed into the labor pains of a new birth. You continue walking with me through this vision, and I need you to see what I saw. America's shaking is not the end. It is the threshing floor, where chaff is separated from wheat, where false hope crumbles so true hope can rise. Do not despise the shaking, do not fear it. For in the breaking, light is kindled, and in the chaos, love becomes visible. The storm of visions did not end in chaos. Slowly, as if a veil lifted, I began to see something unexpected, something tender sprouting through the fractures. You continue with me now, and notice how silence returned, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of rebuilding. Out of arguments, out of cracked walls, came scenes of unity that glowed brighter than the ruins behind them. I saw neighborhoods where doors once stayed locked swing wide open. A woman carried baskets of bread, knocking on doors that had been strangers just weeks before. Children, barefoot, chased fireflies in yards that once stood divided by fences. Men with calloused hands repaired roofs that were not their own. Women cooked meals not just for their families, but for entire streets. The smell of beans and bread mixing with laughter, until hunger no longer separated but drew people closer. The air felt warmer, softer, because it carried the breath of mercy. The main emotion of this part was tenderness, like watching wounds heal in slow motion. There was no denial of pain. Scars were still visible. But the tenderness came in how those scars were no longer a reason to hide. They became reminders that healing had begun. The tidbit of information that struck me deeply was this. Unity is not the absence of difference. It is the decision to love across difference. In the vision, black and white, Hispanic and Asian, rich and poor, young and old, all held hands. Their languages varied, their accents clashed, but their prayers braided together into one rope strong enough to lift a nation. I remember watching prayer circles in city parks. No microphones, no banners. just voices rising like smoke, steady and strong. Songs were sung in kitchens and backyards, some hymns centuries old, others birthed in the moment, improvised but holy. The music smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread, as if heaven itself had settled into domestic life. The sound was gentle, but its effect thundered. It made walls of bitterness crumble like sandcastles at tide. 3 soft forms marked this season: the soft brush of hands clasping across boundaries, the soft murmur of lullabies sung while the world outside still trembled, the soft glow of candles in windows as signs of peace. Each soft act, multiplied, became more powerful than any loud shout. When fear rose, love rose higher. I watched with awe as households once divided by politics or pride leaned toward one another, realizing survival was not in being right but in being together. Jesus stood at my side, his expression calmer now. His eyes, fierce with warning earlier, softened as he whispered into my spirit, "When fear rises, my love rises higher. Those who carry my love will become bridges." The word bridges echoed. I understood that revival would not look like platforms or personalities. It would look like people laying themselves down so others could cross from despair into hope. In one small town, I saw a park where teenagers, once absorbed in glowing screens, formed a circle and prayed aloud. Their words were awkward, shaky, but pure. Elders joined them, their voices carrying wisdom like low drum beats, steadying the rhythm of the young. Together they sang until even the air seemed to vibrate with harmony. A policeman passed by and, instead of dispersing them, removed his hat and bowed his head. That moment glowed so brightly it felt like the entire park had been folded into the garden I had walked in earlier. The smell of unity was distinct. It wasn't perfume or incense. It was the smell of shared meals, sweat from honest work, and the faint sweetness of flowers placed on doorsteps as offerings of peace. It was the smell of family returning, even among those who shared no blood. That fragrance wrapped around the nation like a balm, soothing divisions that once felt carved in stone. And I saw something else. Fear began to lose its grip. Where once it roared in headlines and screens, it now shrank back in the presence of community. Lies scattered like smoke and wind when people looked each other in the eye and remembered they were neighbors, not enemies. Love did not erase difference, it sanctified it. People remained themselves, but the sharp edges of suspicion dulled. It was as though the Spirit himself walked the streets, stitching wounds with invisible thread. Jesus' voice rang again. "This is the America I showed you. Not perfect, not triumphant, but awakened." His words pulsed with such certainty that I felt my own heartbeat align with his. I realized that the greatest miracle was not in the storm ceasing, but in people remembering who they were in him and who they could be to each other. You continue listening now, and I urge you to hold this image. Not a land free of trouble, but a land where neighbors open doors, families pray, and love becomes louder than fear. That is revival beyond politics. That is unity born of heaven's tenderness. The vision shifted again, and what I saw next unsettled me, not with fear, but with a kind of holy surprise. You continue watching alongside me, and notice how the stage of the world changed. Platforms crumbled, microphones silenced, and yet, new voices began to rise. They weren't the ones I expected. They weren't the powerful, the wealthy, or the polished. They were the overlooked, the ordinary, the ones who had walked quietly in the shadows while history paid them no mind. Now, in the shaking, God brought them forward. The first was a young man, barely in his 20s. His clothes were plain, his shoes worn at the edges. His voice trembled as he spoke to a small gathering in a school gymnasium. But as he spoke, truth poured out, not rehearsed speeches, not slogans, just words set on fire by God's presence. People leaned forward, hungry. His weakness became strength because it was not about him. It was about the Spirit flowing through him. That was when I understood. Leadership in this new season would not be about status, but about surrender. The main emotion of this part was reverence, as if I were standing barefoot on sacred ground. My heart bowed as I realized how God delights to use those we often overlook. The tidbit that burned into me was this: the world chooses by resume, but heaven chooses by heart. Purity of heart, not power of image, was the currency of leadership in the vision I saw. I watched mothers once dismissed as just homemakers rise to guide entire neighborhoods in prayer. Kitchens became sanctuaries, dining tables turned into altars, and bread broken in community became communion in the truest sense. I saw grandmothers, their backs bent with age, stand and speak with wisdom that silenced arguments in seconds. Their words were not long, but each one struck like a bell ringing in a tower, steady and undeniable. They had been hidden until the appointed time, and now they stepped into roles God Himself had prepared for them. Teenagers, too, carried voices that startled me. Boys and girls, their faces still soft with youth, spoke visions that cut through lies like light splitting the dark. Their innocence carried clarity. They weren't distracted by agendas or intoxicated by popularity. They simply said what God showed them, and truth flowed like clean water. You continue listening and feel a kind of holy envy, how simple their faith, how powerful their purity. 3 soft forms defined these new leaders. The first was the softness of humility. None of them claimed credit, their eyes always lifted toward heaven. The second was the softness of presence. They carried calm that settled rooms, not the loud charisma that demands attention. The third was the softness of tears. They wept easily, and their tears became seeds that softened even the hardest hearts. These forms were not weakness. They were strength clothed in gentleness. In one town, I saw a small group gathered in a barn. Straw covered the floor, the air smelled of hay and wood smoke. A woman in her 50s, her apron still dusted with flour, stood at the center. She read scripture aloud, her voice trembling. As she read, people began to weep, not out of sadness but recognition. In her simplicity, the Spirit roared. That barn became a cathedral of light, and no one there ever returned to ordinary again. The fragrance of this new leadership was different than any perfume or incense. It smelled like bread just out of the oven, like soil freshly turned in a garden, like tears drying on a child's cheek. It was the fragrance of daily life infused with holiness. Leadership smelled like home. I turned toward Jesus, astonished, and asked in thought, why them? Why not the known, the skilled, the powerful? His reply was firm but tender. Because America will not be saved by politics, but by people willing to stand for truth, even when it costs them. His words carried weight. The truth was simple, but its simplicity cut through centuries of lies. I realized then that the greatest danger to revival is not persecution but compromise, and the greatest power is not in strength but in purity. I saw scenes that made me tremble. Ordinary people, nurses, farmers, teachers stood up in public spaces and prayed aloud. Their voices shook, but heaven listened. Crowds gathered, not because of eloquence, but because of authenticity. It was the sound of people who had no agenda but obedience, and obedience carried an authority the world could not counterfeit. You continue listening now, and I need you to take this in deeply. The leaders of tomorrow will not look like the leaders of today. They will not carry fame, they will carry presence. They will not flaunt wealth, they will carry wisdom, and you may very well be one of them. Do not wait for a title. Do not wait for a platform. If you will carry truth with a pure heart, you are already a leader in God's eyes. The shaking had revealed a new order. It was not chaos, it was correction. And through it, the quiet ones, the willing ones, became the voices America most needed to hear. The vision widened once more, and what came into view was not chaos, not trembling cities, not even the humble leaders I had just seen rising. It was worship, raw and uncontainable, flowing like a river from every corner of the land. You continue with me here, and I need you to hear the sound that filled that moment. It wasn't the rehearsed noise of performance, it was the cry of a people rediscovering their Father. And that cry shook the ground more than any earthquake. I saw stadiums first. Not filled with sports fans, not roaring with rivalry, but crowded with families, children, elders, young adults, hands lifted, faces wet with tears, voices singing in unison. There were no lights flashing, no famous names on banners. The platform was nothing more than a few microphones, but no one cared, because the presence of God filled every seat. The sound was like thunder, not from the sky but from the ground, as thousands sang hymns that seemed to pour straight into heaven. The air smelled of rain after drought, like a land quenched at last. Then the vision shifted to barns and open fields. Straw on the ground, lanterns hanging from rafters, people gathered on benches, singing so softly that even the horses outside turned their ears. In empty schools, gym floors became altars. In backyards, families gathered around fire pits, guitars strummed, and voices cracked in imperfect pitch, but the imperfection was beauty itself. Three soft forms threaded every gathering: the softness of voices singing in low harmony, the softness of hands laid gently on shoulders in prayer, and the softness of silence that often followed a silence so alive it roared louder than noise. The main emotion of this part was awe, holy awe that melted pride and erased the idea that revival belonged to one man or one church. The tidbit of knowledge etched into me was simple but seismic. True revival cannot be staged. It begins in hearts, spills into homes, and only then overflows into crowds. What I witnessed was no campaign. It was family broken, messy, unpolished, but radiant with God's presence. I saw miracles, but not the showy kind. A child laid hands on her father's shoulder, and years of bitterness dissolved as he wept and embraced her. A young man prayed over his friends shaking hands, and the addiction that had haunted him seemed to fall away like old chains. In one living room, a single mother knelt with her children, and the atmosphere thickened so tangibly that even the walls seemed to glow. There were no cameras, no headlines, just ordinary people carried into extraordinary grace. The smell of these places lingered with me: wood smoke, sweat, bread baking, tears drying. It was not the fragrance of incense, it was the fragrance of life lived open before God. Revival smelled like kitchens and barns because it had moved beyond sanctuaries into the places people lived their daily lives. That was its strength. It could not be confined. Jesus' presence wrapped around me as I watched. He whispered into my spirit, "This is the revival no man controls. It begins in hearts, not on stages. It will not be owned, branded, or sold. It will be carried like fire in clay jars, fragile but unstoppable." His words vibrated through me, and I realized that the very weakness of these gatherings was their shield. No one could exploit what belonged to everyone. I saw chains breaking quietly. People who had carried depression like a cloak suddenly laughed, light pouring from their faces. Hatred dissolved between neighbors as they embraced. Even sickness lost its grip in circles of prayer, not with fanfare but with simplicity. One man, pale and bent with pain, stood straighter as his friends prayed over him, and though he said nothing, his tears told the story. Hope returned like breath after drowning. Then I saw something breathtaking. As these small gatherings multiplied, dots of light spread across the land. At first they glowed like fireflies scattered in darkness, but then they began to draw closer together, clustering until the whole map pulsed with light. The darkness tried to whisper louder, roaring with lies and division, but every time, the light answered back with truth, not shouted truth, but lived truth. And the lived truth silenced the roar. The awe in me deepened until I could only whisper in thought, "This is family. Not church as institution, but church as body. No walls, no denominations, no slogans. Just love, breaking bread, forgiving, praying, worshiping." It was the America of God's dream, not built on politics or power, but on hearts softened by His presence. You continue hearing me now, and I plead with you to remember, revival will not arrive through spectacle. It will come through you, through your kitchen table, your living room, your backyard, your prayer whispered at night. It will come through small faith multiplied, until it cannot be ignored. That was the vision, a revival beyond politics, beyond programs, born from the simple obedience of ordinary people who dare to believe Jesus has not abandoned them. The vision began to fade like the last notes of a hymn lingering in the rafters. The lights dimmed, not in defeat, but in tenderness, as if heaven itself was preparing me to return. You continue with me, and you can almost feel the pull, gentle but undeniable, like a parent softly calling a child back home after play. My heart resisted. I wanted to remain in that garden of unity, in those fields of worship, in the glow of faces lit with prayer. But the Lord's eyes turned to me, and everything inside me knew. This was not the end of the vision. This was the beginning of my mission. Jesus leaned close, His presence like fire and water, fierce and tender in the same breath. His gaze pierced me, and I realized He saw every corner of me, every hesitation, every fear of being misunderstood, every worry about speaking aloud what I had seen. And yet, He was not disappointed. He was inviting. His words came soft, but they carried eternity. Do not let fear steal your voice, for your voice will be a spark in the gathering fire. The phrase, "fear steals," branded itself into me. I knew then that the greatest battle I would face back on earth was not ridicule, but silence. I whispered, though I had no mouth, "But Lord, I am ordinary. Who will believe me? His smile undid me, both playful and eternal. I do not choose the qualified. I qualify the chosen. He touched my face, not flesh, but soul, and I felt strength seep into me, as if courage itself was poured into my bones. I realized it wasn't about my ability, it was about my willingness. He didn't need perfection. He needed obedience. The main emotion here was surrender, deep and unflinching. My heart bowed, not because I was forced, but because I was loved into yielding. The tidbit of wisdom he placed in me was clear. Testimony is not ownership, it is stewardship. What I had been shown was not mine to hide or shape to my advantage. It was his message, and my task was simple: share it plain. Then came the ache of leaving. My guide appeared at my side again, eyes kind, posture steady. He said nothing with words, but I felt his thought. It is time. I shook my head like a child refusing bedtime, desperate to stay in the light. Please let me remain, I begged silently. Jesus touched my face again, and his voice, calm as the river, wrapped me. My presence will not leave you. That promise became an anchor in me. Even as the garden blurred and the river dimmed, his words rang clear. His presence would stay, even in the noise of earth. The transition felt like slipping back into a coat I had outgrown, heavy, tight, uncomfortable. My chest clenched, not with freedom but with the burden of flesh. The garden's fragrance of blossoms and bread gave way to the stale air of my car. The silence of heaven's music was replaced with the dull hum of a world still unaware. My body lay slumped in the seat, and then with a gasp like breaking the surface of water after drowning, I was back. My eyes opened. My hands trembled. Tears slid hot down my cheeks. I was alive, but I was not the same. For long minutes, I couldn't move. I stared at my hands, whispering, I've seen too much to ever live casually again. Every sound around me, the breeze through the trees, the rustle of leaves, even the hum of insects felt sacred. I stepped barefoot onto the grass, and it kissed my skin like heaven had followed me home. I picked up a single leaf, and it glowed in my palm. I laughed through tears, realizing, miracles surround us daily, and we call them ordinary. That night, and many nights since, I wrestled with the weight of what I had seen. Part of me wanted to stay silent, afraid of mockery. But his words echoed louder than fear. Do not let fear steal your voice. So I began, quietly at first, sharing with my church, then my neighbors, then anyone willing to listen. Each time, I trembled. Each time, I felt his presence steady me, the same presence that walked with me in the tunnel of light. You continue hearing me now, and I need you to take this to heart. America's hope will not be found in the White House, in the banks, or in the screens. It will be found in hearts that choose love over fear, faith over despair, and light over darkness. That is what he showed me. That is why I was sent back, not to predict, not to impress, but to testify. His light is rising, and you were born to be part of it. The vision ended, but the mission began. And the afterglow of heaven has never left me. Let me leave you with this. Spoken softly so it lingers longer than thunder. The shaking I saw is not to terrify you. It is not to make you stockpile fear or chase shadows. It is to prepare you, to remind you that faith must be alive, not folded away like an old blanket. When the trembling comes, you are not abandoned. You are invited to pray, to forgive, to open your doors, to hold your families close, to shine when others fade. These are not small acts, they are seeds, and in the storm, they grow into light. You may feel ordinary, so did I, but heaven does not measure worth the way earth does. He looks at your heart, your willingness, your quiet obedience, and in that, he finds vessels for his fire. If you carry his love, you will become a bridge. If you carry his truth, you will become a light. And when fear rises, his love in you will rise higher still. So I tell you gently, do not be afraid. Be ready. Ready not with fear, but with faith. Ready not with panic, but with prayer. Ready not with despair, but with love that does not fail. America is not abandoned. The world is not forsaken. His presence has not lifted. His promise has not expired. What is coming is not the end. It is the beginning of hearts awakened, of families restored, of light rising like dawn after the longest night. If these words resonate with you, leave an amen in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with at least 3 friends or family members right now. Now is your time to make a difference. Spreading this message is not only an act of love, but also a mission that Jesus himself has entrusted to you.